I did the best I could to raise my kids. I was a mess and I missed a lot and I messed up a lot. And I did things that caused them harm that they're going to now have to try to figure out how to heal as adults.
So I've seen online this creator called Dormat Mom, and she talks about her adult children not talking to her anymore, and she's the total victim in this and completely blames them. And I've actually seen videos from one of her children talking about this, but it's this really interesting dynamic that I'm seeing more and more where adult children are going no contact or low contact with toxic moms, toxic dads, abusive parents, and whatnot. And I wanted to talk about this kind of from the other side, from someone who is not taking the route of blaming other people, but what does accountability actually look like? And so I want to have Crystal introduce herself and just kind of talk about why did I pick you to talk about this topic?
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for having me. I'm really, really pleased to be here. So my name is Crystal and I'm a woman and I'm 58 now. I'm not even going to lie about it. I'm 58. And I spent a lifetime trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And about 2.5 years ago, I started this TikTok channel called Fabulous 50s. And I thought, well, I'm just going to go out there and I'm just going to start talking about my life and talking about my pain. And as I started talking about it, people would say, you do realize that what you experienced in your childhood isn't quote unquote normal and that you might have trauma. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I was just shocked by it. I was like, no, it's normal that parents did this and that and this and the other thing. And I soon came to realize that no, it wasn't normal. But the reason I started the healing journey was because about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago, my youngest son, I have 4 children, my youngest son bravely came up to me and said, Mom, you have a drinking problem. And if you don't get this under control, I'm not going to be a part of your life anymore. And that just knocked my socks off. It rocked my world. It terrified me. And I got my ass into treatment immediately. Within 3 weeks, I was in treatment. Yeah. And then I came out of treatment and I relapsed. And as you know, a healing journey is not linear. It can get very messy. And mine got very messy with a messy divorce and me not understanding how to emotionally regulate myself. And about 1.5 years ago, my 2 youngest sons decided to go no contact with me completely.
It had to be so painful.
It is painful. Don't get me wrong. It is. I kept thinking, no, just give me a little more time. I'm trying to fix this. But it got so messy and ugly. And I understand why they decided to go no contact with me because I was not emotionally stable. I really wasn't. And what child wants to see their mom be an emotional mess? You know, kids don't want to see that. But it started to click for me when I actually went no contact with my mom. So I went no contact with my mom for about 3 months. And I knew I always had a very difficult relationship, complex relationship with my mom. I think a lot of daughters can relate and mothers can relate. We have very complex relationships. And there was this one time we were out at a brunch and I was sitting there with my mom. And after 2.5 hours of being in my mom's company, I thought I was having a heart attack. And I kept saying to my mom, I think something's wrong. Like my chest was hurting, everything was hurting. And I was like, I think I'm having a heart attack. And she's like, oh, you're fine. So I dropped her off and went to the hospital because I thought I was having a heart attack. And I found out that I was having a panic attack. And I realized that being in my mom's presence causes me to panic. And I'd already been kind of on a healing journey for about 1.5 years. And I decided I need some space from my mom so I could figure out what that is. So then when I was no contact with my mom, I would think about my mom and I'd be like, oh, my heart pounds every time I see her name come up on my phone. And then I went, oh, darn, my kids have said that to me too. And so I started realizing my kids felt about me the way I felt about my mom. And I went, oh my God, it's me. What happened? Because I swore I was never going to repeat my mother's patterns. I swore I was never going to be my mother. And I turned out in some ways exactly like her and in some ways completely opposite from her. But one of the things I often say on my live streams is, you can't outwit trauma. You either heal it or you pass it down. Those are the two things you can do. You can either heal it when it comes to kids, heal it or pass it down to your children. You can't outwit it. You can't outthink it. You can't think, I'm going to do the opposite of what my mom does, because then you wind up in another toxic state, both of which are extremes, right? And so I started seeing it from my children's perspective. And I realized that they needed space from me, just like I needed space from my mom.
Yeah, that had to hurt though, right? As much as it's like, okay, there's some honest truth, it's like a gut punch of, oof, they need space.
Because then I was like, okay, if I see some of my mom's behaviors as quote unquote toxic, but recognize those behaviors in myself, then I know I've had an effect on my children. I know that I did. And you know what? Here's the thing. A lot of people say to me, oh, you need to stop blaming yourself. I'm like, I'm not blaming myself. I am not. I have learned throughout this healing journey that this generational trauma that we have in my family in particular, I'm Indigenous to Canada. My mother is a residential school survivor, and that runs very deep in our genes. And so this generational trauma that went from, my grandmother to my mom, to me, to my kids, I didn't recognize the role I played in that. But I also recognized after a while, this didn't start with me. I read a book called It Didn't Start With You, and another book called What Happened to You. And those were the two books that made me realize, I think I have childhood trauma. And if I have childhood trauma and I haven't healed it, that means I likely have toxic behaviors that I'm not aware of. And then I went, okay, I got to start looking at this stuff because my kids deserve better. I deserve better. So people have asked me, have said to me, you're blaming yourself. I'm not blaming myself. I'm taking responsibility for what I did. And the reality of it is, I'm not going to cry, Lisa. I did the best I could to raise my kids. I was a mess and I missed a lot. And I messed up a lot. And I did things that caused them harm that they're going to now have to try to figure out how to heal as adults. And so as their mom, the least I can do now is leave them the hell alone so that they can figure it out. It's the least I can do.
Yeah.
I'm going to start crying.
I know. I feel like I'm going to start crying. It's so, my kids are 7 and 9, and I think obsessively, it's almost like a millennial thing, right? Where we're like, gotta be the perfect parent, and you're in a different generation, but that obsession with parenting them in the perfect way so that I don't create trauma. And I'm reminded of my sister being like, we all F our kids up in some way. The point is to try to reduce the harm as much as possible. And I'm like religiously going to therapy to make sure that I don't pass this down to my kids. But I think so much about what that would be like. And even in watching your content, I'm like, if my kids didn't want to talk to me anymore, oh my God, like how would I handle that? What would I do? Because I think what I understand about moms, even that woman, Dormat Mom, what I understand is the defensiveness of like, hey, but I did my best. And hey, but your dad was abusive. And hey, but my mom did this to me and my dad did this to me and it's not my fault and that's not fair. I get the feeling.
Yeah.
But as soon as you spew all of that out at the person you've harmed, you're not taking accountability, you're deflecting. And so like, I get the feelings, but like maybe go unpack that in therapy or with a friend or something.
That's why some people will say to me, how come you never badmouth your children or you never say bring up your own stuff? I'm like, that's for my therapist and me. And I'm not saying that I badmouth my children. I never have. I never have, and I never will, simply because that just feels icky to me. They're my children. But the one thing that hit me was when you said, oh, what would I do if my kids didn't talk to me again? That was a huge wake-up call for me. If my kids don't like the person I am enough to be around me, I need to take a look at myself, not at them. Children naturally love their parents and adore their parents. That's a natural thing for a child to do. But there comes a point in time when parents have to stand up and take responsibility for it and say, okay, two things can be true at the same time. I tried the best I could and I damaged my kids in the meantime. I still fell short. I tried the best I could and I still fell short. I tried the best I could and I still traumatized my kids. Both can be true at the same time. The one thing that has been very difficult along this path is self-forgiveness, because there's always that thought in the back of your mind that goes, if my own children can't forgive me, how dare I forgive myself? Does that make sense?
Oh my God, that hit me. That makes so much sense. We talk about that, the idea of self-forgiveness, but how can you just live your life? Like, okay, I forgave myself, and somebody else is still going, wow, was that easy for you? I don't forgive you.
Exactly.
That's hard.
Exactly. So I've been working diligently in therapy now on self-forgiveness because this is the way I look at it. So I've got a few analogies, but one of them is a playpen analogy. And this is how I say it to moms whose kids are low contact or no contact. You know, when our kids were small, we used to put them in a playpen so they could be safe, and we would get our work done. We'd get our laundry done, our dishes done, our vacuuming, whatever we needed to get done. And they were safe. We didn't have to worry about them. I often tell parents now, think of your child the same way as a no contact child. They are fine. They are safe. They are doing their own thing. This is your time to get your work done, because those kids they just may, there's no guarantee, but they just may peek their heads out of that little playpen area and say, hey, are you still the same? Have you changed at all? Have you accepted any responsibility? Are you able to acknowledge the pain that you caused me? Are you able to validate me and hold space? No? Okay. And off they go again, right?
Yeah.
That's what tends to happen often. So I say to the parents, now is my time to look at this as a gift. This has been one of the most painful gifts of my life, but it's been a gift because I now have, my eyes are open to my own behavior, to my own toxicity, to my own crap. You know, like I often, people say, well, what kind of toxicity are you talking about? Well, if I wanted my kids to do something a certain way, and they're adults, keep in mind they're adults, and they were like, no, I want to do it this way, I would try to do everything I could to convince them to do it my way. And that's just manipulation. I didn't understand that at the time. I was like, I just want them to do it my way. But I didn't understand that. And now I see that I did that.
How do you think that, if you use that specific example, how did that affect them?
It made them feel unseen and unheard. It invalidated their opinion on their decisions on what they want to do and how they want to live their own life. Mom, you're not in charge of me. I'm now an adult. And
Yeah.
completely invalidated me by me saying, I'll give you an example. My oldest son, at the time that this whole COVID thing was coming out, he decided to not get vaccinated. I decided to get vaccinated. Neither's right, neither's wrong. I'm not going to be here to debate that stuff. But I tried everything I could to convince him to vaccinate. And he said, Mom, that's not your choice. That's not your decision. And I hear that. I hear that in my head now. And I go, I wonder how many times I did that to him, because that's the time I remember. But for every time I remember, there's probably plenty of times that I did that I don't remember, but they do. It might have been a normal Tuesday for me, but for them, it was a day that their mom invalidated them and made them feel unimportant.
Yeah. And when that happens repeatedly, it makes sense.
And I was emotionally unstable. I was one of those moms that I was not emotionally stable. They never knew what version of me they were going to get. If they were going to get the calm, mellow mom, like, or if they were going to get the erratic, emotional mom that was crying and, drama, and they just didn't know what they were going to get. And so I can't imagine what it would have been like for them to, see my name pop up on their phone. Like, I know what that feeling is like. And so when I recognized that that's what I was doing to my kids, I just wanted to stop doing that. I wanted to stop hurting them in a way, and one child decided to write me a long text and tell me exactly the reason he was going no contact, told me he was going no contact, told me why, said goodbye, and blocked me on everything. The other one just ghosted. And so they don't respond to me at all. And I don't blame them. They need their time. They'll come back to me when they're ready. I sometimes, on birthdays and stuff, will say happy birthday by a text, but I don't expect anything in return. I just want them to know, your mom's thinking about you today. I hope you have a good day. And I hope that just even that little bit of contact lets them know that I'm here for them, but also isn't overstepping those boundaries. Like some moms show up at their kids' door and, unannounced, and show up at their jobs and text them and text them and text them. And it's like, leave them alone. Just let them have some space.
Yeah, I feel like, in the effort to reconnect and like, give me a chance and keep trying, you're also doing the complete opposite of what they've asked for and what they need, which only shows them that you're not healing. You're not changing. In fact, I see this even in the context of an abusive relationship where people say, how can you know if he's changed if you won't let him back to show you? Part of the fact that he's bulldozing you and railroading you to come back and show you shows you that he hasn't changed, because if he changed, he'd respect you. So I don't think it's any different with an abusive or toxic parent that you're trying to go no contact with. It's just like, no, but you need to hear me. You need to see that I've changed. The demonstration of change is in, frankly, what you're doing. You're
Yes.
describing that. That's what I'm hearing. And I think that's
Yes.
incredible. It's so rare because you see so much online. I actually once got a DM from someone on Facebook and it blew my mind. I was so confused by the message because she said, I just saw one of the videos where you were talking about going no contact with a toxic parent. And this is what I think. This is so unfair that it always gets put on the parent. I don't make content on this topic. I don't know what she was talking about to this day. I have no idea. She might have confused me, but it seemed like she had just watched a video. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, lady, but it sounds like your children are adults. It sounds like they've gone no contact. I'm sorry for that. And I wonder if you might seek therapy. She thought I was offering her working with me. That's not my wheelhouse. Specifically, I do talk to a lot of survivors of abuse, domestic violence, narcissistic relationships that have difficult relationships with their parents, but it's not my primary topic. But I could see in the message from her why her kids went no contact. She was like flying off the handle to a complete stranger, defending herself. For what reason? The defensiveness, though, I get. Have you struggled with that? Because it's you sound like you accept it, but where's the struggle in some of this? Like it had to have been really hard.
It's been hard to get to this point. I mean, I did send a letter to my youngest son, but I still wasn't in the greatest of headspace, so I probably shouldn't have sent the letter. I made it more about me than it would have been about anything else, but I recognize that now. I don't blame my children. I think it's because I see it from both perspectives. I see it from the adult child perspective when I look at my mom and my relationship with my mom. And then I see it from the parent's perspective when I look at my children. And I try to offer them what I wish I could have gotten from my mom: grace, compassion, understanding, validation, all of the things that I'm trying to heal from now. I'm trying to give to my children from a distance, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I live fairly close to my kids. Like, we don't live that far apart, you know? Often sometimes we'll look around. I do all the time. I shouldn't say often, sometimes. Virtually every time I pull out of my garage, I'm watching for them just to see if I can, and I've only run across them twice. So
Missing them, I almost can't even find the words. Missing them and they're right there, wanting them to reconnect. I completely get. You're talking a lot about your two youngest. What about the two oldest? Where's that at?
Okay, so Reader's Digest version. This is a very long story, but I first became pregnant with my first child when I was 14. I had her when I was 15 and then was married to her father when I was 16 and had another child that year. So by the time I was 16, I was married with two children.
Yikes.
The age of 18, my husband at that time, his parents decided that they wanted to raise the children and that we were going to divorce. They came and took the kids on a Sunday afternoon, in the middle of the afternoon. I tried to get out of the house with the kids. I couldn't get out of the house with the kids. So I ran across the street to phone the police. And while I was across the street, they put the kids in their vehicle and left with them. So I didn't get a chance to raise those two daughters.
That's heartbreaking.
Well, here's the thing. When my sons went to no fault of their own, absolutely, this is no fault of their own. But when my two sons went no contact, it triggered the pain from losing my two daughters. Now, I am in contact with my older two daughters. We've rebuilt a relationship. This happened in the 80s, so it's a while ago. We've rebuilt and we're very connected, especially my oldest daughter. So I have a relationship with them. I just don't have a relationship with my two sons.
That's heartbreaking. Do they have a relationship, your sons and your daughters?
I encourage it. And I've said to my daughter, I said, do not talk about me. If you're going to have a relationship with your brothers, don't make it about me. because that's going to triangulate them, and it's going to make them, you're going to feel like you're in the middle of something. They're going to, and it's not healthy. Have your relationship with them, whatever that looks like. Is it close? No, it's not close. They probably speak to each other a few times a year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's good. It would be nice if everybody was close and all the things, but, life and trauma, and I get it. Let me kind of shift and ask you, because I know that you came out of an abusive relationship as well. Do you think, keeping accountability in mind, right? How did that relationship affect you as a parent? Because I know, having been in an abusive relationship myself, you cannot be, this is my subjective opinion, you cannot be the best parent while you're in an abusive relationship. Like it puts you in a pressure cooker. You're not yourself. You're not thinking clearly. You're reactive, all the horrible things. So what's your take on that?
First things first, I'm going to openly say and admit that relationship was toxic on both ends. I see my own, and I have made peace with the fact that I messed up in that relationship as well. There was a lot. You had two people who were, it's so interesting because when we met, we were just both in horrible situations, and both a little broken and feeling a little broken. And we just connected over, our traumas, and then we would trigger each other and the whole trauma bond stuff. And I was very much a pick-me girl. So I would put men before my children. And that's difficult to admit, but I always put my relationship with men before my children. And so how did it affect my kids? It made them feel less important. It made them feel like they weren't the most important thing in my life.
Yeah. That's heartbreaking too, I had an episode of this podcast where I was interviewing Logan Cooper, who's a trauma therapist, and talking about what type of parents, what type of behavior, what type of households create victims of future abuse in romantic partnerships. And a lot of what you describe, feeling unseen, unheard, unloved, manipulation, neglect, those kind of things, that often leads people into bad relationships, which really only can layer the guilt for parents whose kids are struggling to have relationships with them. If you accept that guilt. And again, it's so refreshing, such a weird sort of thing to say to someone, but it's refreshing to hear someone who actually feels like, I messed up and I want to do better, instead of just like, fine, I messed up, but that's not fair because, and gives you all their reasons. It's like, I wish more parents could gain something from watching your content or listening to you.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to work with parents whose kids have gone low contact or no contact to get them to understand and shift the perspective. Some people have asked me as well about my daughters-in-law, because both my sons have long-term relationships. And because, again, a lot of these parents want to blame the daughters-in-law. They want to say, and I'm like, if anything happened with my sons, and I'm so grateful for this, they found healthier women who knew and looked at me and went, your mom's a mess. And I think that it helped my sons to understand what a healthier relationship is. Do you know what I mean? So I'm grateful to my daughters-in-law that for being good partners for my sons, healthier partners, and that they didn't wind up getting into relationships that were incredibly toxic. Now, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors all the time, of course, but for the most part, I think a lot of, especially moms, will blame the daughters-in-law. And it really isn't. It's more times the daughters-in-law are seeing the toxicity, seeing the dysfunction, and pointing it out to our sons. And that's putting them in a healthier position. And it opened my son's eyes to some of the stuff that neither of my sons might not have ever spoke up to me had they not had strong, healthy women in their lives.
It's healing for them. I love that.
Yes. And that's all I've ever wanted for my kids is to be able to heal from what damage was done to them,
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, that's all anybody wants. That's why I overthink my own parenting constantly. Is this the right thing? Is this the right decision? I am a human being. So, shocker, I have yelled at my children, haven't we all? But something that my own therapist says to me, and I really appreciate this because I kind of need this sometimes to be reminded that we're humans and sometimes we yell and we make a mistake. The repair is the key. And so much of what we're talking about is your repair right now is longer term. But when I see these little moments, because my kids are so much younger, if I yelled if you apologize, it's not that it erases it, but it shows them what accountability looks like. It shows that you understand that what you did is wrong. So I will say, if I might say to them, I know that I yelled, but I want you to know that it was because I was having big feelings and that had nothing to do with you. And it was on me to walk away and take a deep breath and calm down. And I didn't do that. And I'm sorry. It's
Yeah.
not like, but you were frustrating me. If you hadn't just put your toys away, then I wouldn't have had to have yelled.
Yeah.
That leads up to, if you just had been a better son, then, and that's
right.
That's not helpful. Blaming a child, especially a literal child. Your children are adults now. And it's hard for me to even picture not having my kids in my lives. But my therapist also said to me, and I love this, that if that ever happened where they felt like something was so bad in our relationship that they were going to go no contact or needed to reduce their contact with me, she was like, you would be open. I can tell that about you, that you would be open to hearing what you could do better and you would try to fix it. Where, not to harp on this poor woman, Dormat Mom, because she's clearly struggling, but you're going about this in the most backwards way you possibly could, and it's not going to result in a relationship. But I almost wonder, do you think, I know this is just speculation, do you think her or people like her, moms like her, do you think they actually want to reconnect with their kids?
I have been in contact with parents who have said, no, I don't want anything to do with my kids. I have been. I have had parents like that who have said, no, it's a blessing for me that my kids aren't in my life. And you know what my response to that is? I agree. 100%. If you think it's a blessing that your kid is not in your life, then I agree. For your kid's sake, I agree.
Yeah, probably better for them.
Probably better for your child. Yeah. Some parents have said, well, I've gone no contact with my child. I'm like, no. No contact goes from adult child to parent. Parent to child is abandonment. You don't get to walk away from your kid because it gets too hard.
That's an interesting way to put that. I actually I agree with that so much, because I see, and I mean, like, people disagree, but I can't imagine how. The parent is the one with the power, so to speak. So you can't go no contact. You don't get to blame your child for things that happen to them as children, or blame, but you didn't try, or, somebody said this to me the other day, the phone works both ways.
Yeah.
No. Yes, but that's not fair in this context. It's up to you to maintain a relationship with your kids. It's not up to your kids to be the one calling you and seeking you out. I think that a child, again, I'm talking about adult children that feel like they have to chase their parent.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Yeah.
That really sucks.
So I did that with my mom. I noticed that, and I'm going to say it from an adult child's perspective. I have forgiven my mom. But I still struggle. I still struggle with my relationship with her. I still get triggered quite a bit from, all this stuff that we've got in our past. It takes a long time, but I've forgiven my mom for all the things that she did or didn't do when I was younger. But I also have something that some other parents, some other adult children don't have. I have an apology from my mother. My mother apologized to me. She said to me, I'm so sorry. I wish I was a better parent. I didn't do things right. I didn't know how. I see it now, and I wish I could have done it differently. And so just having that level of accountability has gone so far in repairing our relationship, and so far in me having some compassion for her, some grace for her. The other thing parents say to me is, well, how come I'm supposed to do all the work? My kid is just mad at me. I'm like, okay, how old are you? Because I'm 58. And I started my quote unquote healing journey at 55. That's when I started becoming aware of my own bullshit. My kids are in their 30s. They're still figuring it out. Give them the space and grace to do that. Give them the space and the freedom to do that. Does it hurt me? I miss my kids. I miss my grandkids. There's 2 grandkids that I don't get to see. And I don't know them after a year and a half. I don't know them anymore. And that's sad. Yeah. But they're not my children. They are my children's children. They don't belong to me. I don't have grandparents' rights. Grandparents get privileges. The privilege to be around a grandchild if the parents so choose. But my kids get to choose that. So I release that. I let that go, because that is how they want to raise their children right now, is to have some distance from me. And that is totally okay by me.
I think that's amazing. that you have that attitude. Do you have any advice, not for the parents, because I know that's what you do, right? That's what you talk about. Do you have any advice for the adult children that are considering no contact or low contact, or just really like anxiety ridden and stressed out about their relationship with their parent?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing that piece of advice I would give to an adult child is learn how to set and maintain boundaries. Learn what a boundary is, and of course adult children will go, "But my mom doesn't respect boundaries." I'm like, "Listen, we don't set written down boundaries or verbal boundaries with people who get boundaries. We set it with people who don't get it. So you're going to have to get some pushback from your parents. It's your job to maintain that boundary." So understanding, I talk to the adult children, and I do run programs on boundaries and how to maintain those boundaries under pressure, because that's really key, especially once you're an adult. You should be able to set boundaries with your parents, even though it feels scary to do so. If you can learn to do that, that's the first step. Number one, I think that's the first thing you should try. If you feel like you're being triggered by your parents a lot, then obviously there's a lot of trauma there. And I suggest that you figure out a way to heal that, whatever that looks like for you, whether it's traditional methods, indigenous methods, holistic, spiritual, psychological, whatever works for you. Incorporate all the tools and try to heal that stuff, because that stuff's going to just go with you for the rest of your life. And the last piece of advice I can give to an adult child is, if you're still wanting and looking for validation and an apology from your parent, and you're holding on to that, it's the holding on to that that's hurting you. If you can figure out how to release that need for your parent, and they're like, "But then how do you have to learn to validate yourself. You have to learn to say, I know this happened. I'm okay with my parent not acknowledging it. I'm okay with it." So that's about where I would start, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. You said something earlier about really kids wanting their parents' approval. You want your parents' love, connection. But the truth is, when you're not getting it, you have to find a way to get that from yourself. And I mean, therapy, if you have a good therapist, it can do wonders. Reparenting yourself, IFS is amazing. I've even done some empty chair exercises in therapy that's painful as hell when you're talking to an empty chair, but you're envisioning a parent, a person in front of you. And it can be really healing because you get to just say the things that are on your chest that you probably can't say to your parent or your ex or whatever.
Yeah, that's very important. We know now through research and everything that we've learned that trauma lives inside our body. And if we don't release it, it just eats at us. It's like it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So releasing it with an empty chair exercise, with a letter to your parent that you burn afterwards, with a conversation with a good therapist where you're getting it all out, it's important. It's a release. And if we don't release that pain that we carry with us, it just compounds, and it shows up in toxic behaviors, in inability to emotionally regulate yourself. All those things will show up in that way if you don't get it out. So getting it out, I've seen those empty chair exercises. I want to try one. Have you tried
It'll
EMDR?
rip your soul. I have never tried EMDR. I have heard about it. I've done brain spotting, which my therapist says is similar, but not quite. And EMDR, I've heard such great things about. I've heard only that it can be re-traumatizing if you don't have kind of a base of how to handle some of this. So you might want to get some coping skills first. But have you done EMDR?
I have done EMDR after I went to treatment for addiction, and I realized that didn't work. I thought it was going to be this beautiful magic pill and I was going to be fine after that. It helped. There were some things that helped in treatment, but going into trauma therapy was probably the most helpful for me. Also, I've done plant medicine journeys, so I'm a firm believer in that too. And so EMDR was one that was recommended to me by my trauma therapist. And I tried it. And at first it was just weird because you're just watching a ball go back and forth on a screen, or you're holding on to buzzers that alternately buzz in your hands and make, these really weird sensations go on. And then, 3 or 4 days later, you feel this release, like something has been just lifted off of you. So I think it's very important to try different modalities of healing, figure out what works for you, because what works for every person is different. I know of IFS. I understand the basic outline and concept of it. I've never experienced IFS as a form of treatment.
It gets you. It gets you. You talk about the different parts of you that are holding on to things or that feel angry or protective, or it's really, if you have a good therapist on that, it's difficult work, but I recommend it. But you are totally right. I love, it's a perfect thing to say that something is different for everyone. So you have to really find what works for you. And I always think, if it's not working, you have the wrong therapist or you have the wrong modality, but therapy works. And breaking this generational trauma is so important. So, so, so important.
That's why I'm proud of my kids. They've had the courage to break that chain of generational trauma. And at one point I was saying I was breaking it. And I remember my son saying to me, "Well, Mom, it's not actually you, it's me, but that's okay." And I was offended by that. I'm like, "What do you mean I'm doing all this work? You already raised your kids, Crystal. You already passed it down. Now I'm healing for me.
Yeah. And they'll do the same. They'll do the same.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Thank you so much for
Thank you,
being
Lisa.
here. I'm so glad to have this conversation with you. And I will put all of your contact info where people can follow you in the notes so that people can connect with your content and learn from your experience, learn from your mistakes, and learn from your healing. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.